key to scaling your business as a startup CEO is gaining leverage. And the way you gain leverage is by adding a team around you. Now, there's a right way to scale and there's a wrong way to scale. What we want to do is we want to avoid the killer mistakes that'll destroy your business as you scale. That's what we want to avoid. And I'm going to teach you how to do that in today's video. So let's get started. Now, the first piece to being able to scale, and I'm going to assume you've already added your team, is to know your team, to know the strengths of your team, to know the weakness of your team, who can be pushed, who can't be pushed, where you can delegate to, and how you can delegate to your team. That's all part of understanding how to scale. That's the first step, is you've got to understand your team, their strengths and their weaknesses. That's the first piece. The second piece is holding on to the things that you and only you can do, and then delegating as much as you can to the rest of your team. But now let's talk about that piece, because this is what gets startup CEOs in trouble again and again and again. I've seen this so many times in the work that I do with CEOs, is that they'll have a co-founder who wants a crack at sales when they know that they're going to be the best salesperson in the company, because typically you are as the startup CEO, but they give it to their co-founder to do, and guess what happens? Disaster happens. The person who's never done sales before can't close a deal. The company starts falling behind on its revenue plans, isn't scaling properly. So that's an example, a very radical example of something that you have to hold on to, are the things that only you can do. So in this example, it would be sales. So for me, obviously, I was out there selling, but there were other things that only I could do. For example, I was very good at strategic planning and marketing. So that's where I spent the emphasis of my time. I didn't give that to other people to do. I held on to that. You should keep that same thought process as well until you get to the point where you're scaling big enough where you hire somebody who's even better than you in that area. But until then, you hold on to those responsibilities for as long as possible. Okay, the third one is be very careful about delegating tasks that could kill the company. These are the company killers. And this is the classic thing, because when you delegate, it doesn't mean, just like I said, you delegate everything. And in the example I was giving previously about the CEO who delegated sales and big deals, this is what that CEO did, was a huge mistake. He was delegating the biggest deal, the make or break deal, to his co-founder. Oh, what a killer. It was not a smart thing to do. And when we talked, I said, you got to do it. And he says, I know. And I said, well, why are you giving it to your co-founder? And he says, well, he wanted to do it. And I said, you've got to take control. You're the CEO. You've got to do the tough things. You've got to say no. You have to do it, which is the exact right thing to do. So he took it over, and then he closed the deal, and everything was okay. But imagine if he hadn't. Be no company. So beware of the company killer things and delegating the company killer things. Those are the things that you want to stay personally involved with and probably own. The fourth thing is you have to audit the process. In other words, when you delegate to somebody, it doesn't mean you wash your hands of it and say, hey, I'm done. Everything's good, right? We're cool. There's no more for me to do here. I'm done. No. You audit. In other words, you check in with whomever you've given this task to, and you make sure that they're okay. And you're constantly auditing. So for me, it might be once a week. If it's something really critical, maybe it's every day. You're going to know the cadence, but make sure whatever your check-in points are, that you understand what's going on. You're asking, do you need any help? What's happening? Tell me where you're at. Tell me the progress you're making, what the challenge you have. All those types of questions that you need to ask to make sure that the person is doing what you need them to do, to make sure. And if your lieutenants are delegating, it's the same thing for them. They have to be making sure and auditing the process. They don't get to wash their hands and say, well, my subordinates screwed it up. No, it's on them. The ownership, the buck, if you will, stops with you. And it's the same with your team. The buck stops with them too. If everybody has a thought process when they delegate, then they'll audit the process automatically. But you have to lead. You have to show them how to do it. That's your goal. Fifth on our list is you have to let your employees fail. Now, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, right? First, I said you got to audit the process, but sometimes it's better to let people fail. Now, again, not a company killer thing, but you know what? You can let somebody do something their way, which is fine, and let them fail. As long as it's not going to kill the company, it's cool, because you know what? That's how people learn. If they ask you for your advice, yeah, I'm happy to give you my advice. I wouldn't do it that way, but you know what? Try it your way. Go for it. Let's see what happens. That's how people learn. It's like this throughout life. When we fall off our bike, you know, what do? We get up and we learn from, why did I fall? Or if we're out too much in front of our skis and we fall down when we're skiing down the slope, same thing. You learn. That's what happens in business as well. Just make sure that when they're falling and failing, that it's not a company killer. Then the mistake is correctable, they learn from the mistake, and they grow from the mistake rather than you controlling everything. Try it. The next one on our list is make sure that the employee doesn't break something catastrophic when you delegate to them. So let me give you an example of this, and I can go back yet again, to that make or break sales deal. Now that's one probably shouldn't have been delegated, but let's say you delegate something because you're out of bandwidth and you have to delegate it to somebody else because you need them to do the best that they can. So what should you do in this process if it's really critical? Because if they fail, it's going to be catastrophic to the company. Maybe it's a company killer. And again, you don't want to delegate those, but let's say you have no choice, you have to, for whatever the reason is. Well, what I would do is then you increase the monitoring. Maybe instead of weekly meetings, it's daily meetings. Yeah, I know that's annoying. I know that's painful, but you know what? This is what we need to do. We need to break the tasks down into smaller tasks that are manageable, and we can make sure the progress is happening the way that we need it to. Years ago, let me tell you a quick story about this, about managing this way. There was a huge $25 million deal I was doing with Lucent back in the day. And we had promised them delivery of a product, and we were on a very short schedule, maybe 3 months if I remember right, for something that typically would take a year. So what did we do? I mean, this was an engineering project. I had an engineering team, but we managed the team on a daily basis. Every single day we had an update because it was a team in 3 different countries, doing multiple tasks, and we met every single day to keep the project on schedule. And guess what happened? We delivered the project to Lucent on the exact day. And we told them we would. Why? Because we were managing it tightly. That's what you do when something is critical and you delegate it to somebody. You manage it even tighter, not looser. You don't hope. You stick your neck in, you stick your nose in, and you understand what's going on. And you explain to people beforehand, hey, I'm going to be managing this really tightly because it's so important. Yeah, you're going to do the work. I want you to do the work, but we're going to have daily meetings on this. And if they argue with you, no, I don't need the daily meetings. Yes, you do. And you're very stern about it. You tell them, absolutely, we're going to do this on a daily basis. And they'll understand it. They may not like it, but they'll understand it. That's what you do. That's what good managers do. That's what good CEOs do when something is critical. They don't hope. They dig in. The final and probably the most important thing to do when we're delegating, and this is a cultural thing, but it goes to everything because you want to teach people to ask for help. And that's on you to create a culture where people feel comfortable asking for help, because most people won't. And you're going to have to be very consistent in your communication with your team as you're going through these monitoring meetings. You're going to have to teach your managers to do the exact same thing, to be consistent in telling everybody, hey, ask for help. Don't wait for the meeting to tell me you're behind. Tell me immediately once you realize you can't solve the problem on your own. I learned this great example from this gentleman named Steve Combs, who was one of the founders of Maxim Integrated Products, a company I worked at for about 11 years. And Steve, who ran operations, had this saying he used to say. He called it a Hobson's choice. Now, Hobson's choice is after this fellow named Walter Hobson. You can read about him, you can Google him. And he owned a stable, I believe it was in 17th century England. And essentially it was, you can have any horse you want, just, it has to be the first horse you get. In other words, you have no choice. And it's the same thing, that you want to avoid in business, because if you put me in a position, this was Steve's thing, is if you put me in a position where I'm in a Hobson's choice, which means I have no choice, I can't help you. So you want to avoid the Hobson's choice. You want to have options. You want to make sure your team understands. You want to make sure your team understands, you know what? If you can't solve a problem, it doesn't mean I don't think you're good. On the contrary, you're asking for help. That's what I want you to do, is ask me for help immediately when you have a problem. Don't wait. The sin is when you wait and you avoid me and you tell me at the last second, hey, I'm a week behind schedule and there's nothing I can do about it to help you. That's how you fail. That's how you lose. So that's what we want to avoid. Let's go through the summary of these things that we need to know here. Let me walk you through it. The first one is you have to know your team. The second one is you have to hold on to the responsibilities that you and only you can do or should do. The third is be really careful. Delegating tasks that could make or break the company. These are the killers, the company killers you need to avoid. Fourth, audit the process. Fifth, let your employees fail. It's important, but make sure that they're not killer mistakes that they're failing for. That's number 6 on our list. Step in before an employee breaks something catastrophic. 7th, encourage your employees to ask for help. That's the company culture piece. Now, when we do all this right, the benefit is we have a team that is exponentially growing because we're leveraged. And that's the mark of a successful team and a successful startup CEO. I'm Brett at brettjfox.com. Have a great, great day.